going to talk about democracy for New Zealand. And democracy, and I've just looked up the definition. Anybody like? It's government of the people, of all the people, for all the people, by all the people. And what I'm interested in is by all the people. Because up until 1996, which was the first proportional representation election, we had first past the post. And it produced very unfair results. Once, Social Credit Party got 20% of the vote, 2 MPs. In the prior to the famous Longi government election, when Muldoon in a drunken stupor called a snap election without even telling his president, in 1984, David Longi won, Labour won. But the 2 elections prior to that, they had got the most votes and National became the government. So it was unfair, unrepresentative. So this is what this is all about. Here's a brief history of it, and I encourage you to take a photograph of this board, because I'm not going to run through it all. But I'm going to point out that there was a coalition of interested parties, organisations, who wanted a better electoral system. And that meant a proportional system where the government was voted in by the majority of the electors. So, Electoral Reform Coalition was formed in 1987. We formed a branch in Rotorua in 1987, and we had a number of activists, letter writing, street corner discussions on soapboxes. Meg was part of that, and pamphlets and so on. So our job was to educate the public about the advantages of proportional representation. The Longi government formed a Royal Commission on the electoral system. This is their report. It took about 18 months to produce. It's an amazingly comprehensive document looking at electoral systems all around the world. STV, proportional, in all the different countries. New Zealand had adopted the English system, first past the post. So, and it's subtitled Towards a Better Democracy. That's what it was all about. Having a government that truly represented the electors. So, that report came out. Labour stalled in having a referendum to decide whether we wanted to change our electoral system. But finally, we did have a referendum under the Bolger government, 1993, and the MMP was adopted in 1994. They made a few changes to the system that was recommended by this. They came out in favour of MMP, and but the government made changes. And one of the significant changes was that they introduced coattaling. That meant if one candidate was elected to represent an electorate, he could bring in, even if they didn't make the 5% threshold, he'd bring all his mates in with him. And that's where New Zealand First and some Act and so on have become part of the government. But anyway, skip that. That was the first election. That was very memorable because Winston Peters took, I think it was about 6 weeks to make up his mind. There were all sorts of negotiations going on. We went overseas just after the election. We came back expecting to see a government. No, they still didn't have a government. So that was a pattern that was established by New Zealand First. They held the balance of power too well. They weren't always part of the government, but mostly they were. Very difficult. Whether they were part of the next government, 2020, we don't know. Okay, so there we are. As part of forming or selecting the MMP proportional representation, it was the first government here, National and New Zealand First. The Greens came in as a memorandum of understanding, MOU, under Helen Clark, and we got the first in the world an MMP, a member of Parliament elected as an electorate MP, and that was Jeanette Fitzsimons way back in, where are we? 2015 was it? 205. No. I had it there. Anyway, yes, 1999. On the election night, we didn't make the 5%, the Greens did not, and we had no elected MP. But the specials came in. The Greens have always done very well with specials, and so Jeanette Fitzsimons won the seat, Coromandel, and the Greens got over the 5%. The Royal Commission recommended 4%. So we had back here another referendum putting the MMP up again against first past the post. But the MMP that was put up against it had some modifications which returned the system to what was recommended, a 4% threshold and no coattailing. And that was carried. The majority of population, 57.8%, went for MMP ahead of first past the post, and they went for the system that was originally recommended, 4% threshold and no coattailing. The government said, no, it's not binding, we'll ignore it. And so we still have the 5% threshold, which discriminates against smaller parties. How are we going for time?
30 seconds, Mike.
Okay, so the important one is, what's the difference between these? First past the post, it's a party that wins the most electorates. And because of the representation and the numbers of people in each electorate, it can happen that the government does not represent the majority of the electors, people who vote. MMP, we have 2 votes. One is for the party, and that determines the number of seats in the government. The party vote. The electorate vote determines who's going to represent you in your electorate. So we have the best of both worlds. It is a system that was designed by the Allies after the Second World War and imposed on Germany. It was very carefully thought out, and it is the best electoral system in the world. So we have it too. We're very privileged. Make the most of it. And the way you can do it is by strategic voting. Vote if you want a Green Labour government. Vote Green as the party vote and Labour for the electorate. Yeah. And there's your candidate. I'll leave it at that, and you've got opportunities for asking any other questions, and the answers are all me.